Welcome back to the seventh and final part of a white, gray, black manga book club discussion of Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind by Hayao Miyazaki. My name is Bruce. I am joined once again by my absolute worm handler of a co-host, Gautam.
The spirits of the forest be with you.
We have now read and completed Nausicaä and the Valley of the Wind, and what a ride it has been. This was 12 years of Hayao Miyazaki's life writing this. He made 5 movies while writing this manga. I think it was
crazy.
82 to 94, I believe is the publication date here. I read a little bit of sort of, what inspired it before we started it. Now that we finished it, I went and read a little bit more online. A lot of people compare this to something like Dune. And I would say that's maybe the most apt comparison I can imagine. This is very Dune-like fantasy, I would say. It's very kind of nihilistic.
Actually, it's quite reminiscent. There are giant bugs. It had an Ender's Game type of ending too. Mm-hmm. All very good, interesting. Just a fucking great manga. I get the Dune comparison,
and its influences, real quick, are maybe more widespread than we even knew when I first did research. The creators of Final Fantasy who made Chocobo, we've been joking about it, they directly just say out loud, like, oh yeah, Chocobo based on the horse claws from Nausicaä and the Valley of the Wind, right? Because it
makes sense.
Predates Final Fantasy. The author of Panzer Dragoon games say that it's thing. If you've played Metal Slug 3, one of the first bosses is just an Omu. Like, the Nausicaä in Japanese culture is prevalent. This is an important piece of media, and now that we've finished it, I can definitely say solidly it is important, it is quality, it has things to say, and it's very, very good.
The creator of Evangelion, of course, we discussed how he worked as a key animator, but on the movie, but he stated that the ending of Nausicaä heavily influenced Evangelion, and honestly, I can see it.
You can see, yeah. I mean, these whole last 2 parts, I would say, are very Evangelion-like. We'll save all of the sort of what is it about, what are the themes, how did we feel about it for the end. Let's get into what happens, because there is a lot that happens. This is an incredibly long part. This is, I think, 210, 220 pages, while most of the other parts were 130, 140, 150. So let's go real quick through what happened in this.
Yeah. Let's go through our recap, and I'll save our conversation for the very end, because there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. So pretty much we pick up right where we left off. Nausicaä's with her God Warrior son. They look badass. The art here is really cool. We get some new info drop here right at the beginning, which is going to be kind of our last MacGuffin, our last thing to chase. We learn about the Master of the Crypt and the Crypt, which is in Shua, the capital, right? It was funny. I was listening to our last episode, and or maybe episode 5, and we were pointing out Namulith, the Doric Emperor. We were like, oh, the endgame baddie is here. The endgame, like, this is him. This is the final guy. It's so funny how he turned out to be like almost a comic relief character in the end.
He was such a shithead. I loved it. Like,
it's great. I loved it.
Even at the end, he was cracking jokes, making me smile. I enjoyed him.
Yeah, he's great. Kushana is demanding from Namulith, like, tell me who the Master of the Crypt is. He's like, bitch, blow my head off, please. Like, just end me. And Kushana's like, I'm not going to let you off so easy. Kushana, like, drags the top half of his body because he doesn't have legs anymore. And he's just like, I am begging you, Kushana, please kill me.
The joke stopped after.
It's so, like, he's so funny here. He's just like,
but really, though, kill me. Yeah.
Yeah. The God Warrior starts shooting at the Valley Boys who are flying around, but Nausicaä tells him to stop. The beam gets redirected. So this is interesting because it kind of shows the power that he has over this beam. The God Warrior is
dark
still
side
like
beams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Death Eyes, whatever those are called. The God Warrior is like, where's Mama's enemy? I want to fight for you, Mama. Nausicaä says he's like a frustrated child who had his toys taken away. The God Warrior then shoots a beam off for no reason, just kind of at nowhere. It explodes. Namulith says that it's a reject and it can't control its own power. and there's lots of cool lines. There's lots of quotes I transcribed directly here, so I'll try to sort of quote those. But Nemlith here says, quote, "Just a companion for a girl who would be a god."
Yeah, that's a good one.
Kushana literally just like tosses aside the top half body of Nemlith, asks Nausicaä, is like, "Hey, what do I need to do to destroy the God Warrior?" And then Yupa shows up and says to Kushana, like, "We have to leave it to Nausicaä. Like, it's out of our hands now. She's the protagonist. Let her do the protag things." Nausicaä says she's going to Shua with the God Warrior and says, quote, "We are going to seal the doors of the crypt." So the God Warrior flies off, and this is one of those things that is very Evangelion like to me, because it doesn't grow wings. It gets these weird protrusions on its back that like blast this light, and it just kind of like hovers and flies away.
It was tight. It was like so
it's
alien
weird.
And weird. Yeah.
It's so alien and weird, yeah. And I'm not Hayao Miyazaki is not the best action panelist I've ever seen, so I don't know how this is exactly supposed to sort of feel and look, but it feels very strange and weird looking at it. So, but it's also very reminiscent of the sort of rings of light that they get in the ending chapters of Evangelion that kind of surround the mechs there. So,
yeah.
Kushana gives Nausicaä her cloak. Nemlith mentions that this is what the old books meant by, quote, "twisting space." So I assume that this light flying thing is like twisting space around. It seems very cool. This light, the God Warrior flies off with this light, and quote, "Damn light blew me right off the deck. Rest in peace, Nemlith." He flies off and he's gone.
Good exit, man. Make
so
one last crack. One last joke along the way. Love it.
This series is so good about escalating threats, because in the start you're like, oh yeah, war, bad people, and the Sea of Corruption is big, and then it's like, oh, big Dorok warlord, and it gets blown off, and there's something even bigger.
I just love... we love Nemlith, of course, but I actually love the other... the Toromechian Emperor, too, as we'll see later. They're both weird.
We'll get to him at the end.
They're weird, both funny, and unhinged. They're both crazy, logical, but also crazy. And also, like, a little bit... They're both weirdos. Complete weirdos. So,
yes. Yeah, I definitely like them both. The Valley Boys and Kurotawa try to follow Nausicaä, but they can't catch up with her. There's a weird scene where instead of, like, Superman flying or, like, going vertical, he's just, like, standing straight up. The God Warrior is just straight, like, standing up and flying like a bad video game or something.
Yeah, it's like he's riding like one of those escalators at the airport that just
the moving sidewalks. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep, exactly like that. Nausicaä notes something is wrong with this light, and this is the first time we are hearing about the light might not be good and the darkness might be good. We're going to be hearing a lot about this, especially in the later half. So,
and it's very clear at this point, or around this point, that the God Warrior's light is just kind of a metaphor for the nuclear bomb.
I definitely think it is.
It
is influenced by that. Yes.
It's a weapon of mass destruction.
Mass destruction. Yeah, exactly.
And the radiation poisoning they get from the light from the God Warrior, it seems pretty analogous.
It definitely, radiation poisoning is definitely kind of what I would describe as. Nausicaä mentions here that something's happening to the God Warrior. He's not well. His body is kind of deteriorating already. So the God Warrior and Nausicaä land high up in the mountains. The God Warrior passes out and can't move. Nausicaa's also really weak, drained from the radiation poisoning, essentially. Nausicaä speaks internally and says she's hoping for the child's death, yet I go on pretending to be his mother. How hurt he would be if he could look inside my heart. Darkness inside, light on the outside, more themes. Here it comes again. This is going to be said, this is the second time, and it will probably go through this 30 times. This ending part is very much into light and darkness and what those mean and where they belong and etc. So get ready for that. So they almost freeze, but the God Warrior makes Nausicaä warm with his light. She says he's such a kind child. Some Toromechian scouts, who are scouts for the brothers of Kushana, the two fat bros who we met, I guess the last part. They find the God Warrior's nope, lasers him. Nausicaä tells him to stop. Again, very violent, cuts these guys in half. Nausicaä notes that the God Warrior kind of enjoys itself while it cuts these guys apart. which is interesting. And Nausicaa notes that Teto is dying because this place is he's like very close to death. The God Warrior is falling apart, and it's really body horror interesting because like he has these teeth that look like, I don't know if you caught onto this. The teeth to me look like missiles or bombs. Like
I didn't put that together. Yeah, that's a good call out. You're right.
I don't know if they're meant to be, but that's what they definitely like remind me of.
I think you're right. I think they're supposed to be that, but I didn't realize till you just mentioned. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Nausicaa says, quote, "It takes more than powers to become a fine person." I wrote parentheses, "get fucked shonen." In parentheses, "you have to learn how terrible powers can be. With great power comes great responsibility." We got some Spider-Man in here.
Hell yeah.
She then gives the God Warrior a name. She calls it Oma. So, and as soon as she gives it a name, some weird stuff happens. It immediately becomes way smarter. It raises itself up with more like power and is like, Oma is both arbitrator and warrior. Remember, like 10 minutes ago, this thing was a child and couldn't put together a coherent sentence, and now it's using words like arbitrator.
I'm kind of curious as to why that is. It's not explained. There's
a lot that is not explained here.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't want to be like it's intentional that it isn't explained. I think the truth of the matter is that a lot of this isn't explained because it's not
important.
It's not super important. What's important is that the God Warrior, in my mind, represents, and we'll finish up at the end with a little bit more of this, the God Warrior, in my mind, represents sort of the humans' powers of destruction. And it has to sort of grow and evolve in order to say more about it throughout different kind of times periods. I
think you're absolutely right. It does represent like human technology and destruction, and it's a very clear symbol of the nuclear bomb. But I think it also on another side it represents that things can break out of human programming. Any being follows its own path, and it's very much a nurture,
nature versus nurture thing.
Nature versus nurture, but nurture being the biggest factor. Like nature doesn't represent you. Like perceived nature from a human perspective doesn't represent you. And nurture can change how things are.
And Nausicaa talks about that at the very end when she says some stuff about life and owning your own life and stuff. So yeah, Nausicaa is very tonally consistent and thematically consistent in that all of these things tie together really nicely at the end, in my opinion. So I think we will get to it. So Nausicaa and the God Warrior actually get to meet the two Tormekian brothers.
Kushana siblings, the Shooting Princess.
She tells everyone, like, hey, war's over, Dark Emperor's dead, go home, don't worry about it. She knows they're going to the crypts, but she says, you cannot go there. But then Nausicaa, like, passes out, so the brothers take her away. They tell Oma, like, hey, we're helping her. They fly up. Oma follows them there also. Oma starts speaking again. He's like, I am Oma, arbitrator and warrior and judge, like he who metes out justice. Which is really cool. The Oma becomes very badass from here to the end. The cut to the Valley Boys and Asbel. They meet the worm handlers. They all want to go where Nausicaa is. And they say, we can't take you all there. There's too much weight to get on our ship. So the worm handlers just slaughter their worms. Like, they literally just turn around and kill their worms. And everyone's like, what are you doing? What the hell? And they say it's like, well, they would die in the cold anyway. We don't have food for them. This is preventing them from dying a slow death. This is merciful. And this is kind of brutal and interesting, but also plays right into all the thematic stuff we're going to see later. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Right.
Nausicaa, they say stuff like Nausicaa is the thread that joins us all together. I think Asbel notes that. Such an enormous burden that girl carries on her shoulders. The worm guys and Asbel then leave together. We then get a weird, like, narrated page of interlude that talks about how the Sea of Corruption works, which is also noted at the beginning of these volumes that we have. It's just a weird little, like, okay, before I give you the ending, you have to understand how the Sea of Corruption works in case you didn't, and it just kind of like tells you. A little.
The very ending wouldn't make sense if the audience had forgotten how the Sea of Corruption works.
Yeah. And if you're reading this month to month the way it was published, you probably first read how the Sea of Corruption works in like 1983 or 84, and you're reading this in like 1992. So it has been 10 years.
They mostly talk about it at the beginning, right? It's mentioned, but like we only get like a full picture that it's like cleansing the earth over thousands of years.
In part 1, I think.
In part 1, yeah, in like the first chapter or the first
volume, chapter, whatever you want to call it. We get Kushana and Yupa on a mountaintop with the corpse of Namalith. Rest in peace. The Doroks are chanting a tune about Nausicaä. When they hear the Emperor is dead, there's a weird line where Kuratawa's just like there's a weird line. He just like jumps to a conclusion while the Doroks are chanting and singing. I think it might be a mistranslation or like a weird localization thing. He just randomly at the end of the song just says, "You mean the blue-clad one isn't a savior but a god of death?" And then it's like never addressed again. And there's like no context in the song for him saying that. They're like, "Oh, the white-clad one comes on angel's wings and the blue-clad one comes." And he's like, "You mean the blue-clad one is the god of death?" And it's like, that didn't make any sense to me. I think that's a weird, I don't know.
It might be a localization of the song.
I think it's a localization of the song
is relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely relevant to the end, but here it felt really like strange. So
exactly. I mean, like, I think him saying that makes sense, but you're right. Like, the song gave no hints at it.
Yeah, the song didn't really say what he was, and he was just like, "What? You mean this?"
Maybe he's picking up themes from that song that we're not.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
No, because I reread that song a couple times and I did not get it. So
yeah, I just think it was a localization mistake. There are a few of those in the official release.
Yeah, this whole segment here is sort of about this like assassination plot from the Doroks against Kushana. They want to fight back because they're mad at her for killing, doing stuff. There's bombs strapped to women. Charaka is also here playing a kind of Gandhi MLK protest role. They go to him and they're like, "Help us fight," and he's like, "Holy shit, please stop fighting! Like, Nausicaä told you, what are you doing?" Yupa also is here. He tries to stop the women who are gonna like blow themselves up on the ships. Like, he stops them from doing that. The Tormekian army knows about it. They're come marching in. They're gonna kill these women. This is
Yupa's statement is so cool. He's like,
badass.
"Please accept my arm as a gesture of sincerity."
Yeah, he literally, like, a Dork girl, like, throws a grenade, and Yupa grabs it, like, wraps it in his cape, and just holds it, like, at arm's length, and lets it blow up, and it blows his arm off. For a split second, tell me if you were thinking the same thing. For a split second, I was thinking, like, oh, Yupa might be, like, a Hydra, or there's, like, something else going with him, or he's got a robot arm, and he'll be fine. And then it's like, nope, they blew his arm off. He's a dude. He's a normal guy.
I thought he was going to, like, show, like, some crazy technique he learned to, like when you wrapped it up, or something. Like, right? But no, this is way cooler. He just sacrificed the arm.
I think it's because he assumes it's a frag grenade, right? So fragmentation grenade shoots little pieces of itself off. So you wrap it up, and then it maybe won't shoot them.
That was just an awesome moment.
It's so badass.
His arm for the sake of the future. That's awesome. That's crazy.
His future, which is rapidly coming to an end.
The people's future. Nausicaa's future.
Yes. We cut over to Nausicaä as Teto dies. And Nausicaä
that was
feels
crazy, by the way. That was I didn't expect them to just kill off the mascot like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the first of many unorthodox choices at the end here. Nausicaä feels the pain in her arm from that happening to Yupa. Someone comes, I think it's Charaka, comes to Kushana and says something really cool, which again, thematically, I'm just going to say, hey, darkness and light theme, here we go. Adjust your eyes to the darkness and look at those people. More darkness symbolism, more light symbolism. The Doroks start making a line separating the combatants from Kushana, again, sort of in a peaceful protest type of way. When the Doroks finally go on to try to kill Kushana, Yupa steps in and takes like 7 swords in the chest, just takes them, and stands there because the dude is a badass. He's absolutely badass.
He's sick.
I think We can mention really briefly, we talk about Yupa real quick here, because this is his end. He dies here. I think Yupa knows here that he has to sacrifice himself because Yupa is only ever really a combatant in this world, right? He is sort of stopping fights from happening and creating sort of the right engagements, but he's kind of a warrior at heart. And he knows, I don't necessarily know if like he knows he doesn't have a place in the future that Nausicaä is going to bring, or if the story says there is no place for Yupa in the future that Nausicaä is bringing. But I think thematically, for the character, for what's coming, it makes sense that Yupa doesn't make it to the end of the story. I think it is correct.
I agree, and like it's not like he doesn't have a place, but more like his skills aren't going to be needed.
Right, and because he sort of represents a warrior class, a person whose knowledge is all fighting and battle, and that's the world that we're trying to move away from in this last chapter. So, Yupa's body is briefly replaced by like the Holy One after he gets stabbed. This is Chikuku's doing. He admits it later. His parting words are super important. Yupa's. He tells Kushana, blood has not sullied you, but cleansed you. This is like a Christian imagery thing, right? Of cleansing blood. That's a Jesus Christ thing that happens. It is the righteous rule that befits you, not the path of Asura, which is a Japanese sort of like demon path, devil path, bad path. Which is really cool.
It's like a path of constant war and violence. Yeah.
Right. Chikuku, the little kid, then comes and talks to Kushana. He says, Nausicaä told me about you. She said you are a deeply wounded bird. Where did I go? She said you are a deeply wounded bird. She said you are actually a gentle bird with broad wings and a big heart. And then Chikuku and Kushana shake hands. This is, it doesn't really directly say it, but I think what we learned in the last part is that Chikuku is sort of descendant of the older rulers of Dorok, and this is sort of a handshake between, I would say, the de facto Dorok ruler at this time, since Namilith is dead, and Kushana, the de facto ruler of the remnants of Tormechia. So
the future Tormechian hierarch, I guess, or potential. Yeah.
So we are back to Nausicaä, and she's on the ship with the brothers. She's like in the wing on a little like glass. There's like a window above her or whatever. She's like, these guys have insurance. Oma, get me out of here. And Oma just reaches in and grabs her out of it. So, the Oma talks to the brothers who are like, you can't take her. What are you doing? And Oma's like, do you guys want to come? And they're like, what? And then he grabs them and takes them with him. So the God Warrior then tells all of the other Tormechians, like, return to your homes in peace. He's speaking on like a very normal adult human level of speaking now. He shoots a laser and they all run off. So we've kind of, like we've spoken about in the past, we're sort of eliminating extraneous characters and actors in this, and we're down to the important people. And we're going to keep sort of getting rid of people that aren't important and kind of paring down our cast to the climax. So Nausicaä, who was kind of being covered in Oma's hand, was like, Oma, did you shoot at those guys? And he's like, lol, no, I just convinced him to leave all on my own, mommy, no big deal.
What a good kid.
So when he shoots his fire breath to his laser to do that explosion, like more of his flesh starts melting off. So I just wrote in parentheses here, humans destroy themselves with war. This is kind of a pretty Oma's kind of a self-explanatory character in that when he attacks, he falls apart. He is a representation of human in their war, and when they use the weapons, it is bad. It destroys itself in addition to what it's aiming at, right? That's kind of the two-sided thing. It's that what Miyazaki is saying here is that humans, in creating war and using weapons against others, are also destroying themselves, metaphorically, potentially literally, stuff like that. So, pretty good lineup there.
Yeah.
I think that's a note for later. Yeah. So they start flying away, Nausicaä and Oma, and they find some ruins with a single tree. Nausicaä demands that they land so that they can bury Teto under the tree. They bury him. She finds goat droppings, assumes someone is there, and they find a man who approaches them and comments on Oma, one who is accompanied by a dog of death, weeping over the death of a small animal. The man is familiar with the F-Tal tongue that Nausicaä speaks in, and he notes that she is telepathic. So this guy kind of pretty quickly knows what's going on. Oma then collapses, and the bros think that they were poisoned by the God Warrior, but the guy that they just met in this ruin area hits him with the sickest burn to date, and he says, quote, "It's because you ran and you do not have bodies that are fit to run," because these are huge fat guys.
Yeah, they are very fat gentlemen.
Yeah, which I thought was hilarious, how he was like, "You're not poisoned, you tried to run and you're fat."
You're just fat. Yeah. I love that.
So Oma collapses, and the man takes Nausicaä and is like, "I'm going to take care of her for a while." Nausicaä notes as she's getting carried off by this guy that she has the same smell as her mother. Parentheses, spoilers, this is not a good thing. We kind of wake up with Nausicaä, and we see inside this ruins, it's different. It's like the old world, right? We see very similar to what Nausicaä saw in her dream. We see sort of plants and animals, and everything is working. There's trees, there's goats everywhere. These goats act like this man's servants. And Nausicaä notes that they are nothing like Teto or Kai, what I think she means here is that they're nothing like... Teto and Kai were not servants. They were like friends. They sort of worked together. They made their own decisions. I wonder if this is translated maybe better as like slaves or something, because these goats are very much just this kind of like slaves, servants to this man who's here in the ruins.
I think they're more like familiars, because they still voice their opinions, but they're
like compelled to serve, to do what he says.
Yeah, they are service animals for this guy.
Yeah.
Whereas Teto and Kai are, it's like collaboration, right? They still do what Nausicaä wants, but Nausicaä respects their autonomy and the fact that they are just a creature by themselves that can do whatever they want.
Yeah. So Nausicaä then sort of wakes up in a bath that she doesn't remember taking. We just kind of get a hard cut to this. We don't see her falling asleep or anything. She just kind of, boom, wakes up in a bath. It's like in an even more wild and pretty place than she was before. And I think we get here, there's a panel of Nausicaä smiling, and I think this is maybe the first smile we've seen on Nausicaä since Chapter 1. There's not a whole lot of smiles in this series. So,
yeah.
She knows that she was supposed to remember something, but she can't. She hears music, which is, she goes and finds is the Tormekian bros kind of learning and performing all this old music. She then remembers Teto and cries, and then Oma. The man who is there looks concerned when she does this, and then the goats start begging her to stay, which they'll do a couple times here. She kind of runs around this weird like dream farm ruins world, sees that the farmer are Hydra, and thinks like, oh, could this be the crypt? Did this throw you for a loop? Because I thought this was going to be a cool twist. I thought this was going to be a cool, like, oh, this is the crypt. We're already in the climax. We're going to go from here.
I thought it was the crypt. When she suspected it, I was like, oh, this is the crypt. That makes sense.
Yeah, I did too.
But
which is a little... Yeah, it turns out it's not. But it was an interesting sort of like misdirection, I guess. She sees, I think it's Mito and the Valley Boys ships fly over, but they can't see her. We cut to them, and they look down, and they just see ruins. So she's in some kind of weird thing. The garden is invisible from the outside, essentially.
Dean, I think this is kind of... This area is here to represent the stakes behind the final decision.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's the main reason to have this kind of mystical little forest area.
Yeah, it's... Let's get to it at the end, because I think we're going to take a break after we talk about the garden, because the garden is very important. So
yeah, I just wanted to bring that up as kind of a reason for it to exist within the story.
Yeah, it does feel a little kind of side story-y, but it's not. So when Mito and the worm handlers fly over, luckily the worm handlers can hear Nausicaa's brain thoughts. They see the footprints of Oma down by the ruins, and so they're like, okay, we got to land. Nausicaä in her little dream world garden. It's just called the garden, I think. Nausicaa's in the garden. She goes back to where the gate was, and it's gone. So she is trapped. She tries to force her way through and is sucked inside like it's like soft stone wall. It's like very weird.
It's like that Harry Potter.
It's platform 9
training.
3/4. Yeah. I wrote that, I think, at the very end when she walks through the wall again. The man appears to her again at this point, but now looks like a woman and starts to sort of like emulate her mother. He does like a "let me see your tongue," which is like a kind of flashes us back into a I don't know if it's a fantasy or a dream or a memory or a combination of all of those, of like Nausicaä and her mother. And this garden keeper dude just tries to, from here on out, it like gaslights Nausicaä into being like, hey, this is the place you've always been looking for. This is the place of peace. This is the place of nature. It's the only peace you'll ever find is right here. Nausicaä is like hard. Like she is hard like a 30-year-old cop in LA is hard. She's like, that's not going to work. You have the power to read a person and hear instantly. And you even change your form to suit each guest. You enter their hearts and make them forget their sorrows and pain, and then turn them into your servants. And here's where she gets hard. She says, but I closed my heart the moment I gave Oma his name. I am beyond your reach. She's like, I adopted...
She's a single mom. Yeah.
She's a single mom to a thing that she knows is going to die, like, at this point, like 4 hours, right? She's like, I know it's going to die, and I gave it a name and promised to show it love, even though I knew it was going to die. It's like,
this is the cause of Tito's death, and also, it didn't help that Yupa also died, so she's going through some shit. I don't think the weed is going to help this time.
Yeah, not at all. So Nausicaä is literally so traumatized, you cannot make me comfy because being comfortable does not feel right to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Nausicaä remembers her mother because her mother, she says, had a scent of death around her, which again, this is sort of the scent she noticed when the man carried her. She says her mother was kind, but used to sit by a window and stare out a lot. Nausicaä had, I think, 11 older brothers and sisters. This mother had 11 other children before Nausicaä, and they all died except for Nausicaä, and that essentially traumatized her mother. She says that the brothers and sisters that she had absorbed the poison in her mother, and they passed on so the mother could keep living. This is dark and brutal. This is pretty interesting.
And the mom had no love for Nausicaä because she was so detached at that point. It's like a defense mechanism from losing all those kids.
Yeah, which is... makes total sense. Definitely. So the garden keeper dude starts to tell Nausicaä about a boy 200 years ago, much like her, who came to the garden, wanted to leave and change things. We assume this was the Dorok Emperor who took a few Hydra. I think this is, they don't say it, but this is Namolith, right?
It's Namolith. Yeah.
This is Namolith, yeah. At first I was like, oh, it's not Namolith, it's the guy like right before him, but no, I think this is Namolith.
It is, yeah.
So Nausicaä then remembers Namolith's words about her being a messiah, quote, crawl around with the whole bloody lot on your shoulders and see if you can save the world. I think there's different emphasis the second time we hear this, where the first time he's like, oh yeah, crawl around and see if you can save the world. And this time it's like, see if you can save the world, right? Because he tried to do it and he couldn't do it. And he's jaded about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So we learn kind of that this garden is a place where people can die in joy. Asbel now shows up outside the crypt also. We just like get a little scene of that. So Nausicaä calls out to Selim for help. This is the forest man leader who is also psychic. She's literally like, yo.
Sexy forest boy, yeah.
Yeah. She leans down Dark Soul style and is like, I have to summon for this boss, and gets a helper. So Selim and Nausicaä versus the weird forest or garden keeper guy. The guy starts to expound. There's a lot in this last part of there's a lot of exposition, a lot of people just telling us what's happening, telling us what's going on. I think it still works, but it is definitely a lot of lore dump. I would say that, like, if you were separating Nausicaä into like seasons, this entire last part is like an entire season of a show. Like, there is so much packed in here.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. So this garden dude says, I am an immortal watchdog created by the people of the ancient world. He calls Selm and the people of the forest those who have abandoned fire, which makes sense. They are in the forest.
Yeah.
They don't use the sort of fire and weaponry that the others do. Selm notes that when the forest people send some of their people to Dorok, they never come back because they get trapped here in this garden. And they become powerless when they leave the forest, so they can't fight back. And this is where the garden keeper says, let me tell you about the meaning of the Sea of Corruption, and everyone was doomed to die. So this is the twist of the story, I guess you could say. We have assumed up to this point that we are told that the Sea of Corruption is pulling the poison out of the land. It is sort of converting it, and it eventually creates a sort of neutral sand that it turns into, and that is pure of corruption and is good to live in. So we as readers kind of know that the Sea of Corruption is cleansing the world of the old human pollution, and eventually it'll cleanse it all, and it'll be a clean world, and it'll be fine, right? Wrong. Long ago, so here's back to sort of going through what the stories tell us. Long ago, people of the forest sent scouts to where the forest ends, where the Sea of Corruption has already healed the land, because that has happened in some places, and they all just vomited blood and died. The garden keeper says, you are fooling yourself if you think that that represents hope. He then tells them, and here's kind of the big twist, the human body is different from what it once was. It has changed to suit a polluted world. So the twist is essentially the people who lived when the earth and sky were pure could never live in the shadow of the Sea of Corruption. And the people who now live in this world where the Sea of Corruption exists can't live in a sort of pure air, pure world. They are incompatible. The garden keeper even says, if I hadn't changed Nausicaa's body, the pure air of the garden would have killed her. So, and Nausicaa says, so you're saying we can't live without the poison? And I wrote, quote, can't have light without a little dark inside it, because there it is again.
Yep.
So cool. Stop right here real quick. How'd you feel about this sort of like little twist in the story here?
I thought it was great, and it's kind of hard to talk about now without talking about the ending, because like you said, this feels like one whole season, and all of this circles back around to the very end of this series.
Yeah, this is very much a setup for Nausicaa's decision at the end. That's why we have this twist. So
yeah, exactly. And honestly, I say we just keep going, because there's a lot I want to say, but I can't without referencing parts later.
Yeah, let's do it. So Nausicaa wants no more. She says, like, no, like this lines up with what I know, because I did tests. She talks about her experiments with the Sea of Corruption plants and animals. Plants literally grow better, she says, with a bit of corruption in them, and people do too, we assume. She talks about the water and how they wouldn't gather the water as soon as it came down. They would wait, and it would get some of the corruption in it, and then that was better for them. Nausicaa says that it wasn't a natural change, right? It's not evolution that made the world and the people like this. The dude is like, clever girl, and then he ghosts and disappears. Nausicaa feels strangely, she says almost frighteningly serene. And then we get kind of a lore dump. The garden guy kind of shows us and Nausicaa flashbacks and tells us a bunch of stuff. So around the time of the 7 Days of Fire, the world... man, sometimes I just type too fast and it doesn't come out.
You wrote semen.
The world has been polluted so much that the people essentially choose to remake humans using the Hydra tech, essentially, right? And they used the same technique to try to bring the world back also, right? Which these are the techniques where they develop plants and animals, which will crystallize and neutralize the pollution to render it useless, like sand. So the Sea of Corruption starts when they do this. When the Sea of Corruption cleanses the earth, it will die. This was planned by the people who did all this genetic, science, whatever you want to call it. And Nausicaa, I think, notes here that like an ecosystem with a goal runs contrary to the very laws of nature, this is an interesting sort of theme also of trying to create a life that fulfills kind of a narrowed, almost enslaved purpose. I think this is true with the Hydra. I think this is true with the God Warriors. Nausicaä really fights back against that, right? And
well,
she says,
and I think the story has proved that it just doesn't work, right? Man-made plans for how the world
mold
plays out. Yeah, the mold is one, and the God Warrior is the other one. Oma doesn't act like a tool of destruction. It acts
like a kid, like a grown-up dude.
And it follows Nausicaa's teachings, which shows that programming doesn't actually work to the degree that people think it does.
Yeah. This is also, to me, this is almost the more interesting kind of twist that happens here, because in all 6 other parts, we have been talking about there is a man versus nature, man is a part of nature kind of theme that we've been hitting on and touching on. And this is kind of weirdly recontextualize everything in the past, because it turns out that the nature that we kept talking about, which is the Sea of Corruption, was man-made the whole time and is like actually sort of the like biggest quote, like I wrote like it's the folly of man, right? Is to think like, oh, we can take and control this nature and it'll cleanse our world for us. And that kind of again, kind of back to the story, Selm does not like this, right? Because Selm is a guy who works in cooperation with the forest and is a part of the forest, and the forest is kind of his livelihood and his home. And so it like hurts to hear to be told that like, oh yeah, that forest is like a human genetic project, a human designed ecosystem with a purpose that you live in. It's not just nature like you thought it was, right?
Right.
Yeah, Selm says, hey, the forest should be holy and sacred. Nausicaa agrees with him. Quote, the one is the whole and the whole is the one. How could humans create Omu? I think Nausicaa asked this. And then Nausicaa says, a life is a life regardless of how it comes into being, even the Hydra. And I think she reiterates this again at the end when we get there, but we talked about this last time in part 6, and I think it's reiterated here and it's reiterated at the end, is that even though it feels kind of twisty to me and to Selm to be like, oh, that thing that you thought was, just nature, just natural, just evolution this whole time was actually man-made, Nausicaa kind of really quickly wipes that away and says, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if you're a Teto, if you're an Omu, if you're a God Warrior, if you're a human. A life is a life regardless of how it comes into being. It's all life, right? So
I like that, because it's like this dude's like, hey, let's debate philosophy. Here's a huge revelation for you. Yeah. And Nausicaa's like, shit, dude, I have a timeline and work to get done. I can't be here worrying about that shit right now. I like that. Yeah, well, and he's also like, haha, I twisted everything you thought you were right about, you're wrong about. And she's just sort of like, okay, it doesn't change anything. Life is a life, doesn't matter how it was made. Yeah. My feelings about life are unchanged by these revelations of you, which is like... joke's on you, I am so morally consistent that what you said just does not matter to me.
It just literally doesn't matter. Yeah, so... Lots of good lines here. Quote, every life form, no matter how small, contains the outside universe without it. God, sometimes you just write too fast. Every life form, no matter how small, contains the outside universe within it, and it's in without it. Okay, I'm going to do this. Cut that part. Cut that. I'm going to find it in the book, because I'm like, what? Because it's such a good line, and I wrote it down. I think I wrote it down just like completely wrong. Mother, that, two princes, Hydra, lung spilling blood, try to bring the whole world back. Every life form, no matter how small, contains the outside universe within its internal universe. There it is. Which is, I think, is a cool line. That's a cool thing to be like. It reminds me of like Men in Black, like the last like 4 seconds of Men in Black, where it like zooms in on the cat's necklace and it's like a whole universe inside it. Anyways,
Orion's Belt,
baby. What a cool movie. So the garden, we learn, is sort of like a storehouse of the crypt. It's not its center. it is meant to sort of be, after the Sea of Corruption does its job, the garden holds the like building blocks to bring all the old, pure life back.
Essentially their culture, food, customs.
Yeah, the animals, the plants, it's all kind of there.
Like the piano with the music, like all that shit.
Yep. So, talking about the crypt, Nausicaä says, like, I will go there, Selm, not to close the doors, but to pry them open if need be and discover the truth. And Selm says, this time you're going to be my guide. Because Selm is a lot more shaken by this stuff than Nausicaä is, and he's sort of like, all right, I'm in the back seat, you're driving.
Yep.
The garden keeper says to Nausicaä, you are cruel yet kind. Hello, dark and light. Here we go again. Nausicaä wonders if there are other gardens like this one, hidden seeds for replenishing the world after it is purified. There's also some technology in the crypt that has allowed men to create the mold and the Hydra. Nausicaä asks, why is there technology preserved in the crypt that should not be preserved, right? She sees sort of this artificial creation of life still as a form of evil. She asks the garden keeper this, and then he doesn't answer, and she's like, okay, quote, your silence is answer enough. She goes to leave, and she tells the guy, she says, my name is Nausicaä, and he says, that is a good name. That's about the halfway point here. We are making good time. Is there anything you wanted to bring up in this first kind of half before we get to the big climax in the end here?
Honestly, I say keep trucking.
Yeah, let's do it. So Mito and the Valley Boys are looking around the ruins. There's something... all signs of life have been, I believe the worm handlers say, intentionally erased here, right? The garden is keeping itself secret and safe. The chocobo runs off, and then Nausicaä walks out of a wall. Very platform in 9 3/4.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote it here.
Same brain.
Yep. The worm handlers are idiots again. They literally look at Nausicaä and they go, Nausicaä was born from this wall.
I love them. They're so cute.
They're great, actually. It's weird to like hate them for 5/7 of the story, and then love them for the last 2.
It's more or less a meme. Everyone hated them. But yeah, they are like very innocent and adorable.
Yeah.
In these last parts.
Yeah. Oh, so it isn't Mito and the Valley Boys. Sorry, it's just the Valley Boys and the worm handlers, because Mito is with Asbel, and they are following the God Warrior. They're in the ship, the little 2-seater ship. They have to go after the God Warrior. Nausicaä treads the same path as the boy who took the Hydra. This time with the worm handler, she kind of is noting this to herself. She says, like, I'm taking the same steps. Instead of the Hydra, I have the worm handlers and the God Warrior. They give her some new clothes. The goat brings her cape from Kushana and her leggings back, so she's kind of got a new look, which is cool. You'll see her, you can see on the background here that I've got, which you can't see it, Captain, but the watchers can. She's more bathed in red than blue here. So, they try to give Nausicaä a sword here. She says, nope, no more need for weapons. The worm handlers and Nausicaä then are like, okay, we got to run to Shua. They run past what we're told are essentially melted buildings from the 7 Days of Fire, which is really cool and interesting. And they're finding like Oma's tissue on the ground. She tells the worm handlers to like stay away from it. It's radioactive, essentially. The worm handlers then start to hear cannon fire from listening to the ground. Sounds of fighting, but it's not Oma, right? Because Oma's way big. They say, oh, we are 20 leagues from Shua. And I was like, okay. And then it tells us, for some reason, that it's like a little over a mile. And it's like, I gotta say, maybe my least favorite part of this entire chapter is the fact that they tell us that Nausicaä is like a little over a mile away from where all this shit is happening. And then we're about to get all these like explosions and fighting. And it's like, no, she's like 10 miles away right now. Like,
is that how many 20 leagues is?
It says in the book, yes, it says 20 leagues, and it says, I'll find it because it's like, it says 20 leagues, and it has like a little subnote, and it's like 20 leagues is like 1 1/8 mile, and it's like that.
Oh, that's not, you can see that far.
You can see like way farther than that. Yeah,
yeah.
1 1/8 mile is like a 10-minute walk. Like it is not that far. Yeah, Gaelic leagues or 1,500 paces. About. Oh no. Okay, wait a minute. I am wrong. it is telling us that a league is 1 1/8 mile. They are 20 leagues, so they're like 22
20
miles.
miles. Okay, yeah. Okay. So they're like a marathon.
That makes more sense. I think I wrote like 3 different notes about like, I thought they were 1 mile away. How is this happening? 20 miles makes more sense. That makes, because they have to run, like running 20 miles. Yeah, running 20 miles you can do in a day. Okay. So again, the story kind of has to expound for us a little bit. It says, hey, let's flash back and see what's going on at Shua. The king of Tormechia is here. They're attacking the crypt. The priests are begging him not to. And the king of Tormechia is like, kill all of them one at a time until one of them tells me how to open the crypt. So not presenting very well in the start here. The crypt is sort of this huge black obelisk temple building surrounded by a huge moat on all sides, and there is one bridge in, and it is not being breached by any of the Tormechians' attacks. And there is like a laser eye from Ocarina of Time outside the one door that is just blasting dudes apart. The Tormechian guys are like, hey, we'll drop heavy bombs on it. And he's like, nope, can't destroy, can't endanger anything that's inside it. We don't know what's in there. Could be bad. And then here comes Oma. Oma like walks into the city, and you would think like, oh, he's here, he's going to attack it. He kind of talks more than you would think. He literally walks up and is like, let me talk to the king. Where is he? Like, where's the king? But the Tormechians keep attacking him, and so he's like, okay, nukes it is, and like nukes him out of existence. Nausicaä sees this bright flash from the city. She very much worries that she's just about to repeat the 7 days of fire. But the king emerges from the ruins and is able to talk to Oma. Oma says, I am the arbitrator who ends all wars. I will allow no more fighting. And he like points very accusatorily at the king. I actually really, man, I would love to see this animated, because I feel like animating Oma like emoting and talking with like a huge deep Japanese voice actor voice would be very cool.
I want him to talk about his mommy in that deep voice.
To be like mommy, and then to be like, I am the arbitrator who ends all wars.
Yeah.
But Oma invites the king to join him. The king notes that Oma smirks, and it's like they point out that Oma smiles a couple times, and every time they do, they have to say something about it, because the art you have no idea what this thing looks like when it smiles. It always looks weird.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a weird eldritch alien looking creature.
Exactly, and it's like teeth are slowly falling out and made of missiles. So Oma says to the crypt keepers, he's here to seal the door of the crypt forever. He says, quote, judgment has been passed. What you mean by peace is nothing more than the endless repetition of human folly. I was given this power in order to put an end to that folly. And I wrote, he is not wrong. It is essentially endless human folly, very focused on this crypt and the power it's kind of been giving out. Oma says, quote, I am beholden to none but the small mother who gave birth to me, led me, and gave me my name. These lines are just so like epic and cool.
It was so cool, and I think that last part is really sweet. I thought it was, it made me root for Oma. Also, the reason, one thing to note is the reason why Oma marched on Shua is because, as being the good child he is, he figured his mom Nausicaä needed the rest at that garden and to recover, and decided to do the mission of closing the crypt doors on his own for his mom. Yep,
exactly. And so where'd we go? The crypt fires its laser. The crypt essentially is just like, all right, time to nuke. Like, literally levels the city of Shua. Like the next few scenes that we see from the outside, Shua is like a flattened city. Oma fires back at it and is able to sort of penetrate it. And somehow in all of this, Asbel and Mito crash on top of the crypt, and they survive. Pretty much because of plot armor, because the reality of it is that the crypt just like nuked the entire city, and like Oma also gets like annihilated, and somehow like Mito and Asbel are like, oh, we're fine. Like, we're mostly fine.
I thought at that time they weren't really near any of the lasers or explosions; they were above it, and they just got EMP'd out of the air.
That might be
is how I read it. Yeah.
So everything is nuked. Oma collapses. He's got like holes in him because the attack from the crypt was directed at Oma, and he fought back. He's got holes in him. Like all of his teeth are falling out. He sort of says the crypt is still alive, and he falls down into the moat area, assumedly dead or very close to it. Yeah.
But his attack did do a shit ton of damage to the crypt. It effectively
cut it in half, almost.
Cut in half. Huge gash in the crypt.
Yeah, but huge gash. Maybe not cut in half, but like opened a large area. Yeah. So back at the worm handlers in Nausicaä, a bunch of Tormekian ships, after this explosion goes off, crash, and they look inside, and it's like, well, they were dead before they even crashed. Please, worm handlers, what are you doing? Stop looting from the dead. They like, as soon as you're like, oh, I love the worm handlers, they're like, we're gonna be shitbags again. And Nausicaa's like, bro, guys, come on, you don't steal from the dead.
Dude, Nausicaä is like the person who's like, come on, don't loot everything in every RPG, you know? Yeah. Like where you're just looting all the dead bodies.
Yep. So ash is sort of falling from this big explosion. So Nausicaä and the worm handlers kind of take their little calm before the storm moment here. Sets the men down, says, we're going to eat. She says, I'm going to tell you why we're going to Shua and to the crypt. And she says, I want you to pass it on to your clans when you go home. Because she doesn't know if she's coming back. She doesn't know what the crypt is. She doesn't know. I don't think she knows at this point what she's going to do in the crypt, right? She still isn't really decided on, am I going to open the doors of the crypt for everyone to have what's inside it, or am I going to shut the doors and say no one gets this?
I thought this was interesting because this is such an honest thing to do. Because regardless, she has no idea what to expect. It's like, whatever happens in there, tell them the story how you see it, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, it's weird to use the word honest, because what she does here is she kind of lies to them. She lies by omission, right? She tells them that you thought the Sea of Corruption was a punishment, but that's not true. The Sea of Corruption is meant to... is cleaning the world, essentially. She tells them, as long as we don't destroy ourselves, we will be free and clean eventually, which is, as we just learned, a lie, right? As soon as if the world is clean, the people who live in the world right now can't live in it. So she lies to the worm handlers here. So again, this is kind of like you were saying, this feels very sort of kind and uplifting on one hand, very light, but there's a kernel of darkness hidden in there in that, well, it's not the whole truth. And if they had the whole truth...
I don't think... Well, while I think it is like a lie by omission, I think Nausicaä is being honest, or thinks she's being honest. Because... and we'll get to that more in the ending.
Yeah. The worm handlers are like, we should trigger more Daikai shells. And she's like, fuck no, you are so stupid.
Some random guy's like, why would you even suggest that?
Yeah, it's like, you are, yeah, ideas, they like call each other out. They're like, you are so dumb. No, why would we do that? Nausicaä here, again, like, accepts that she told a lie, and she's going to keep telling it. She says, what good can come from making it known that the human body was transformed? And so she essentially is like, the lesser of two evils is one girl lying compared to everyone knowing that we're all doomed in the end. That's true nihilism, right? So,
right.
The world is being reborn, Nausicaä says, even if our bodies are not meant to live in it anymore. So she's kind of content with the fact that maybe what the world needs is for the Sea of Corruption to rebirth the world and humans not to live it anymore. I think she's very comfortable with the fact that maybe that's how it turns out. She thinks that's okay.
It's a very what happens kind of thing.
Yep. And she says, like, for the sake of a single sprout, countless spores rain down, dying useless deaths, right? Trees scatter thousands of seeds, and maybe only a couple of trees survive that. So Nausicaä mentions her life herself was supported by 10 or 11 other dead brothers or sisters for her life to sprout and grow.
And more recently, Yupa, Tito, like... Yep. A bunch of others. Yeah, I agreed.
Exactly. Yeah, all of the guys who protected her in that one battle.
Right.
But here's another great quote from the story from Nausicaä here. It says, no matter how wretched every life form... God damn it, I need to write better. No matter how wretched every life form lives by the virtue of its own power. On this planet, life itself is its own miracle. We are supposed to believe that those who planned the reconstruction of the world could have predicted the action of the Omu or of the giant mold. I don't think so. I suppose those men that left that black thing there to be a kernel of the reconstruction, and it never occurred to them that life itself was the ultimate demonstration of contempt of life. So she's essentially saying here, the people of the past created the garden and the crypt, and she says, trying to sort of circumvent the circle of life in some way by saying, we'll force the world to force this ecosystem to consume itself, and we'll sit here in this crypt and wait it out and then come back or whatever. She says that's a sort of an ultimate contempt of life, kind of not respecting life to do what it has been made to do itself, right? Because
it's not respecting death, which is light and dark theme. Essentially, is it's just a denial of death altogether. It's just a foolish course of action in the ultimate nihilistic point of view.
Yes, and Nausicaä, I believe, when we get there, says pretty much exactly that. That like you, when we get into the crypt, she says you deny death. So this is important. This is the end goal. The final thing that Nausicaä sets out to do, she says that if the past world remade humans to not be able to live once the Sea of Corruption is done, then the crypt must be their way of reconstruction after it's all over. She sort of realizes what the crypt is for before we get to the crypt and learn that she's right? And that them doing this is such a massive contempt for life, and by avoiding death, exactly, that the next words out of her mouth here are, let us never forget the dead. So she says all this stuff, and it's exactly like you pointed out, Gautam, that it's a contempt for life because it is ignoring death. It's sort of spitting in the face of death. So Nausicaä here echoes what the king said, says, as long as ancient technology is able to come from the crypt, evil people will want it and use it, and it has to be stopped. So she's very sort of set on getting that to stop. She says, I sent my own child. I've once again unleashed the fire that destroyed the world. She kind of finds her final resolve in this moment here. Selm is still inside with Nausicaä. We cut to the king, who emerges kind of from Oma's hand that's sitting here separate. The crypt we now see is like alive. It is a fleshy, alive thing, and it is moving to repair itself. Somehow this king's little jester kid survived. Well, by hiding in a box. This one is one of those.
I don't think that's a kid. I think that's just a short.
It is just a small, gross man, but it looks like a child. So he's some people come out of the crypt. The priests come out of the crypt, and they ask if the king of Tormechia, who's here, is like, hey, are you our new king? He says, of course I am. They say, hey, we've come to lead you to the master of the crypt. Let's go. This little jester dude lifts up the face mask of one of these priests, and the dudes under the priest robes are rotting and zombified and ugly as shit.
The priest robe guy looks at the jester and is like, whoa, it's surprising to see someone uglier than I am.
Just throwing shade instantly. Yeah. We learned that these guys are at least 400, 500 years old, but they're not nearly as old, obviously, as the master of the crypt. We got Asbel and Mito on top of the crypt. They notice that the crypt is healing. Asbel goes inside, and Mito is like, all right, I'm going to take the big one-shot thing. I'm going to try to blow up the crypt before it closes. So these two now kind of have their little goal. Asbel goes into the crypt, sees the city that the priests built. Says it's like a parasite built into the crypt. He goes in, he finds a bunch of heads in this room, and then they're all alive. What the fuck? And they chase him out, and he literally by hopping after him. He jumps into a bunch of corpses. It's literally like a comedy of errors now. He's like, oh, I found a bunch of heads. Oh, they're chasing me. Oh, I jumped into a pile of corpses.
He's Scooby-Dooing it up in that crypt.
A little bit of Scooby-Doo here, yep. He mentions, though, that he's like, oh, it's like I'm in a stomach here. And I think this whole crypt is very much set out to have a lot of similarities to a human body. It has skin that heals. It has an eye in the front. It has a stomach.
It makes sense. It's made out of Hydra technology.
Right, which is... And the Hydra technology is the same stuff that made the God Warriors, who are human adjacent. The Hydras are kind of human. Even Namulith's body, right, is a human body, assumed, but it's a Hydra body, so... And
it makes sense if you think about it later. It is an incubator.
Yeah.
It's an incubator for eggs, right? So,
We learn that later. Yeah.
We'll get there, but yeah.
Yeah. So Asbel finds a sort of room where they're incubating some Hydra, and he starts to fight. And then we get Nausicaä like strolls in like Darth Vader.
That was
with
sick.
Like Storm. It's so cool. I love that panel.
She just does like a fucking action hero walk into the place.
Not even like an action hero walk. She does like the bad guy entering the room, which I think is more appropriate than like a superhero. She's about to sort of play the role of darkness, the role of the bad guy here, and she strolls in with her like evil worm handler guys behind her, and like she's like, "Don't worry about anything. Like we're going straight to where we're going." She's like, "Ignore everything. Go further down."
And real quick to mention, the reason why the King of Tauromekia was led into this crypt by the priest is because the crypt needs to work with a large world power or world leader in order for the crypt and the priests within to be kept safe while they're able to do their research. And in return, they will provide knowledge of technology to whoever's protecting them at the time.
Right. That's sort of the political, politically how they work. So Nausicaä and her group, they go down, they find a big hole. She's like, we're going down there. She looks at a group of the priests and is like, you're the leader. And he's like, how'd you know that? She's like, doesn't matter. Go get me an elevator. She's like, take me down there right now. We have a quick cut to a panel. We see that Oma is still alive down in this hole. So Nausicaä and just a couple of her worm handler guys go down to where the King of Tauromekia is and his little baby jester man already are. The king just starts capping people with his gat. He's mad. He's at the end. He's at the center of the crypt at its core, the master. And it's just a bunch of words on a big lump of flesh. And the king is like, when the Tauromekian king, when Nausicaä appears, is like, this is a cool line, I thought. He says, it's another king and a woman to boot. Like, she's so like regal and powerful at this point, and so like sure of her quest that like
she exudes authority.
Exactly. Yeah. And the king sees her and recognizes like, this is another king and it's a woman.
And something that adds on to that is when she walks into the crypt, the priests don't want her inside. And they walk up telling her, like trying to get her to leave. And she just like gives them a glance, and before they can even finish their sentences, they just stop themselves and let her pass.
Exactly.
So she's exuding this authority aura as she walks in.
So we learn now from sort of the priests talking that the secrets from the crypt that they would give to the outside helpers, to the Dorok king and everything, are essentially single lines translated from this big flesh orb in the center of the bottom of the crypt. Even a single line, they say, can take years to decipher, and that they hold the secrets of life itself. They say the master of the crypt is the sole ray of light in this world of darkness. Hello, here's light and dark again. They say the master is about to appear. The King of Tauromekia is still throwing a fit down here, and here we go. This is the climax of Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. It's right here. Light floods out of the center of the crypt through everyone in the room. Nausicaä and the king, it is searching their minds. Light fills the room, and we see a series of sort of people made of light step out of the center. They say, it is important that we speak to you in peace, so we disarmed you. We speak to you as the great many who died meaningless deaths because of their own folly. You living in the period of purification, the day will come when the sea of corruption and the land is reborn. So they're kind of reiterating that we are from before the years of fire. You were living through the time of purification. A time will come when that is over and the land is reborn. The great suffering of the purification is an atonement. And I said, okay, but you aren't being punished, at least not the people in the crypt, right? The people in the crypt are sort of avoiding all punishment by letting the people of the world be punished.
Right.
And they say the crypt was built to help reconstruct the world when everything was purified. So again, there's going to be a lot of light and dark themes and metaphors here, and the crypt and the people of the crypt are given the role of light, and Nausicaa is given the role of dark, and it's very cool here. So they say, children, give us your help that this light should not go out, this light of the crypt. Nausicaa then has a great panel where she literally just says, nay. I said, read, like, translated, fuck that. She says, you are nothing but shadows. Again, dark, light, dark. Visually here, with all of these sort of light people created, Nausicaa suddenly has like exuding a dark aura around her, which is very cool, like, visually. Someone says like she sullied the light because she's giving this darkness off. She says, our bodies may have been artificially transformed, but our lives will always be our own. Life survives by the power of life, which is very core. Life is life. It doesn't matter where it comes from, what it is. There's no separation of nature and humans. It's all, life is just life, which is, I think, maybe the biggest thing to take away from the story. She says it here, right? Life survives by the power of life. If such a morning is to come, then we shall live to face that moment. We are birds who, though we may spit up blood, will go on flying beyond that morning. Morning light, on and on. Lots of quotes here from Nausicaa because she's expounding the best parts of the story. She says, to live is to change. The omu, the mold, the grasses and trees, we human beings, we all go on changing, and the sea of corruption will live on with us. And then she points at the light people and is like, but you cannot change. You have only the plan that was built into you because you deny death, which we talked about earlier, denying darkness, which is needed and necessary. She says, speak the truth. She says, we have no need of you. We don't need you. One of the sort of light ghost guys does this weird face replacement thing on the small man. Says, you meant me to speak the truth, but which truth? He says, the world used to suck real bad. Too many people, all trying to live, all fighting, religion, blag, it was awful. He says, we have the tech to save your bodies when the new world comes. He says, we're a maker of the old world and a hope for the new world. Nausicaa hits him with some fire. She says, oh, so you're saying you're a god. She says, in short, you are a god. One of the many gods created a millennium ago, and over that millennium, you have become covered in sarcoma and filth. She literally says, you are a dirty cancer.
Yeah. That's fucking great.
This is Nausicaa again, I believe. It says, why didn't those men and women realize that both purity and corruption are the very stuff of life? Suffering and tragedy and folly will not disappear in a purified world. They are a part of humanity, again, darkness and light. That is why, even in a world of suffering, there can also be joy and shining light. Literally, I cannot write it enough. Light and darkness. This is what the story is about, this last part especially. This is maybe my favorite line right here. I want to read it again just because it's so good. Why didn't those men and women realize that both purity and corruption are the very stuff of life? Suffering and tragedy and folly will not disappear in a purified world. They are a part of humanity. That is why, even in a world of suffering, there can also be joy and shining light. We could, I think, end the conversation right here, and it would be enough. Because that line right there, I think, says everything that it needs to say about Nausicaa. Right.
Exactly. And I think as we go, the decision she makes is incredibly consistent.
Yes.
So, yeah, let's wrap and talk about it.
Let's keep going. Yeah, we are almost there. She says, even the pitiable Hydra, even they are living things, because you were created as an artificial god of purity, you have become the ugliest creature of all, never knowing what it means to be alive. You carry the scent of an indecent darkness. Cryptman to Nausicaa, again, he says, I am the sole light that remains in the world. They still are saying, no, we're the light. Girl, are you saying that efforts to rebuild the world should be abandoned and humanity left to be extinct? And Nausicaa laughs in their face. She says, your question is laughable. We have lived all these centuries with the sea of corruption. Extinction has long since become a part of our lives. Again, lives are light. Extinction is a part of it. It's darkness. It all lines up. It's great. This is thematically one of the most consistent artistic pieces I've ever read. The crypt guys say, without us, humanity will surely become extinct. You cannot live beyond that morning. And Nausicaä hits him back with, that is for the planet to decide when we get there. Again, she decided earlier before she entered Shua that if the Sea of Corruption completes its purification and the humans all die off, maybe that's the way it's meant to be. And like we called off then, the Crypt guys call her out for exactly what he said. They say that's nihilism. You're literally talking about nihilism here. Nausicaä hits him back with, the sympathy and love of the Omu were born from the depths of nothingness. You are a dangerous darkness. Life is light. Again. It literally just keeps hitting us with it. You are wrong. Nausicaä says, life is the light that shines in the darkness. It literally, the guy can't go a page without writing something about light and darkness here.
It's like all things all over again.
Yeah, oh man, yeah. Maybe inspired by this. Nausicaä says, all things are born in darkness and all things return to darkness. And now it's time for you to return to darkness. And the king all this time is giggling and he's like, lol, I like this girl. She's fun. The king even says, like, the king even at this point, after Nausicaä has sort of given her big monologue here, which is like my favorite part of the whole book, the king says, where did we go? The king says, like, we shall not be your servants. We'll decide for ourselves, right? Which is a very, life is life. It matters. We don't need people who have denied death telling us what to do. The fleshy men get angry, and they get attacked with light again from this sort of big center thing. Sel manages to sort of block the light from Nausicaä, tells her, like, call Oma. Like, get Oma here now. We got to end this. The space they're in starts kind of closing around them to trap them in and trap them with this kind of light fire that they're using. But Mito gets his bomb set off up top, and it sort of pauses long enough for the light to stop, and that gives Nausicaä a chance, a moment. Selm kind of pushes her back and says, like, call Oma now. She does. Oma is alive, responds, and shoots his laser in. The light dudes from the crypt say, like, cease, child of darkness. History shall remember you as the devil, the one who destroyed the light of hope. She says, I don't care. It's like, fuck you. Yeah. If you are light, then we do not need light. She's literally like, hey, if you're selling yourself as pureness and goodness, if that's what you think, then we don't need you. She says, we can know the beauty and cruelty of the world without the help of a giant tomb and its servants, because our God inhabits every single leaf and the smallest insect. This is probably the other kind of most important line, I would say, in the end. It goes very much along with the other part, where it's very much light and darkness, everything matters, and it ties it back into the sort of nature is everything, right? Every leaf, the smallest insect, the largest god warrior, all of that stuff. Nausicaä gives Oma sort of a fire at will command. He does. He sort of opens up a big hole, and he starts kind of crawling his disintegrating body into the crypt. While he's doing this, his legs just get, like, ripped off as he sort of pulls his upper body through. It's intense and disgusting. He's crawling over these eggs that we see. Nausicaä notes that it feels the crypt crying out that its eggs are dying. Eggs that would be their sort of replacement humans at the very end.
In the new world, yeah.
In the new world, yep. Nausicaä says, I shudder at the depth of my sin. They were to have been a peaceful, intelligent people, not violent like us. And then she gives the sort of, like, final command. She says, Oma. She says, return this creature to darkness. Oma grabs the sort of center thing with all the writing, and we can now see it. We zoom out a little bit more, and we see that it's shaped like a heart, and starts, like, squishing it, and light is pouring out of it. Oma explodes the heart in his hand. When it explodes, the king sort of moves to protect Nausicaä from the explosion, looks at her and is literally like, I like you, girl. You're a chaos of destruction and mercy. I wish I had met you a long time ago. The shot outside the crypt shows blood spewing out. It's all kind of falling apart. You can tell it's collapsing. Asbel hops in the lift and is like, I'm going to get Nausicaä. The Dorok ship that has Kashana and the others arrive. There's lots of really good art here with Nausicaä and Oma sort of in the sea of blood. It's cool to think because that blood is blue. We learn a little bit later. Oma asks, like, am I a good son? Nausicaa says, Oma, I'm very proud of you. You are a brave warrior, proud and pure of heart, and you are so gentle. Maybe not, but it's merciful of you to say that.
As far as a walking nuclear bomb program to destroy goes, I'd say he's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's like, you didn't nuke that many people. Good job.
You tried to talk it out. You know what? Yeah.
And then from here on, we are in... that's the climax, basically, that we just read, is crushing the heart explosions. Now we're in sort of falling action stuff. Asbel gets Nausicaa out. Kuratawa comes down in his flying pod, saves Mito from the top of the crypt. The crypt collapses completely. Kushana notes that Nausicaa made it out. They're like, how do you know? She says, I can feel it. This is interesting to me because, one, I like Kushana. She hasn't been in this part very much, but her being in tune enough with life and nature to be able to feel that Nausicaa made it out feels like growth for the character, even this little last part. Nausicaa is sort of brought before all of the people, all of the Doroks that come here. Her clothes are noted to be even more blue than her previous blue getup, even bluer than the blood of the Yomu. The worm handlers are dancing, the dance of rebirth. We are told the scorched earth glows gold in the light of the sun. Kushana tells Nausicaa that Yupa died for her sake. She says, don't apologize, don't say a thing. She says, we've all lost far too much, but it's over now. Everything begins anew. She says, your father protected me and took the full force of the crypt's light himself. The king and Kushana have a little moment where the king gives Kushana the throne. He says, I'm sorry. The king also gives her this really interesting advice. He says, the court is a pit of vipers and they suck, but don't ever kill any of them. He says, if you kill a single one, you will end up as I did, killing and killing and killing, and it's the only way to grab power. Kushana essentially says, I'm not going to be the king. I'll be the king regent, which is sort of, holds the place for when the king is there. There's a cute little moment with Mito and Nausicaa where he says, look at me, I'm blue too. I'm not as blue as you, but I got some blue on me. Nausicaa notes that the blood of the Yomu and the blood of the crypt are the same. This, again, is another sort of repetition of life is life. It's all the same. It's all connected. Selm speaks to Nausicaa one last time, says, hey, let's keep that our little secret. Let's live entrusting everything to the planet together. Asbel and catch a hug. Everyone, Nausicaa says, this is the end of the story, says, everyone, let us depart. No matter how difficult life is, we must live. And there's a little bit of a little afterthought here that tells us Nausicaa remained in Dorok until Chiku came of age. Another legend says she went to go join the Man of the Forest. Kushana was a restorer of Tormechia and the king regent until the end of her days. And Tormechia itself hasn't had a king since. And that is the end of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. So
great fucking story.
Yeah, holy shit.
So the ending, I imagine, is controversial because
it's a little weird. Yep,
it is meant to be controversial.
I think so.
Miyazaki intentionally painted that garden to just be like a parallel that shows how nice the things we have now are, right? Mm-hmm. Like music and culture and peace and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Nausicaa effectively destroying that future is like taking all that away. So that it's supposed to be an ending where our protagonist makes a hard choice that not everyone will agree with. Yeah. So,
well, and I didn't even... you made a good point there. I didn't even think about the garden being used as a way to tell us as readers that, hey, we have music and plants and animals here. Why aren't you appreciating them? But that's very much, I think, what that means. You said that, and I was like, yeah, that rings very true.
Yeah, it's just like it's kind of a show of what we would stand to lose with the decision Nausicaa made. I thought it was great. I think that decision was incredibly in character. And
it all is thematically just so in line. If you read this and I can understand reading this and being like, well, that wasn't the happy ending that I wanted, but I don't think you can read this and be like, well, that wasn't the ending that the story needed. Because I think the whole time we've been talking about it, this is actually where we've been going, right?
I think it's more or less a happy ending if we think about it, because Nausicaa had to spill some blood. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, what she said was very in tune with her learned experience and the audience experience with the story. The best laid plans of mice and men never work, right?
That's the quote exactly, I believe,
Yeah, word for word.
Yep.
And it's shown throughout the story. Well, one, with the mold. Two, with how Oma functioned in general. And they didn't even expect the humans to survive this long in the polluted world. It was supposed to be just the neo-humans that made it out. But the fact is, humanity adapted. And of course, like you see throughout the wars over the ages, that the crypt was being used for its technology to shed more blood. And at the end of the day, like, people are people. Our planning will only get us so far. We can't predict everything. So I think it was a very self-important attitude that the people of the future, when they made this crypt, they made it with the mindset of desperation and continuing their culture and species. But doing so is like what Nausicaä said. It's a contingency plan expecting failure. It's more nihilistic than her point of view. You know, it's having no faith that things will continue just fine, and this is all the natural course. It is it is correcting because people think they know better than nature itself, like than how life exists itself, you know.
Right. Well, and maybe more so even than people thinking they know better than nature. I think more key to that is the people separating themselves from nature while they make a decision like that, right? Because I think a lot of what we got even before this part, but especially in this part, is the sort of life is life. It doesn't matter how it's born. Humans are a part of nature. Humans are life. The Omu, the Sea of Corruption, the forest, the plants, the animals, everything. And I think a big part of it is that when you separate yourself as a human from nature, like the crypt people did, essentially, right? They said, we'll let the nature run its course. We'll go be humans over here. Whenever nature's done, the humans will come back, and then the humans will own the nature. Again, I think part of the garden, the fact that all those goats were sort of like under the command of the guy, that rings wrong to Nausicaä, because that is a separation of humans from nature. They aren't coexisting, like we said, right? The human is exerting a command over nature, in that I am human, you are nature, I command you. And that's sort of the same thought. But all of that ties back to essentially that Nausicaä wants you to think, and Miyazaki, I assume, that you're a human, you're a part of nature, you are a natural thing. Separating yourself from that means that you instantly lose. Every decision you make after you separate yourself from nature will be the wrong one, because you have to accept that you are a part of nature, you are a part of life and that cycle of life and death and everything. And trying to fight against that or trying to separate yourself from that leads to all of the bad things we see in this story, right?
Exactly. And it's all the problems in this story come from humanity putting itself first and their own wants and desires first,
right? And separating themselves from the nature and not saying,
and so and it's the same with the crypt. It's a desperate struggle where they want to preserve everything about the species as a whole, as is, minus the bad things. So they're picking and choosing, and it's a selfish thing. It's very understandable to want to preserve your culture, but at the same time, it is also very much everything else doesn't matter. Our way of life and our survival matters, and it needs to be this way in the future instead of fuck everything else that happened in the millennium where the world is fixing itself. We need to have all this, which is the garden and the culture. Nausicaä says, "Who cares about all that? We don't need that. We have our own."
Yeah. Well, and it's a big part of, again, because it's so thematically consistent. It's a big part of the humans separating themselves from nature and saying, well, we'll go be humans. We'll let nature run its course. When nature is done, humans will come back, instead of what the people who currently live in the world do, right? Like Nausicaä, like the people of the forest, they say, we'll live with the nature, and that makes us, I don't want to be like, that makes us better, but like in the story's point, that does make them better, right? They have not separated themselves from their nature, and so they are better for it, rather than the garden and the crypt, which have said, nature's going to go do its thing. We're going to go over here and be humans. We'll come back to nature later and take it over, and it'll be our thing. So,
yeah, it's like, hey, we fucked up. We're just going to nap and redo with minus the mistakes we made last time. And trust me, bro. It is effective. It's just a selfish kind of desperate perspective. And Nausicaä sees it for what it is. And within the context of the story, her decision is the correct one.
Absolutely. Yep. And it does suck there, but it's also like, she even notes it at the end, right, where she says something like, when the eggs are being destroyed, she's like, oh, these people were going to be peaceful and good, and we're not. The humans who are here now are warring and angry and sad, and that's bad. And she sort of recognizes that, like, bittersweet's not even like a strong enough word for this, because this is like, again, you are getting rid of what should be, a perfect idealistic future for, whatever you can build from the scraps of bullshit that's left behind after all this.
And I think that sentence is also more so Nausicaä just lamenting the fact that she has to take all these lives. Because at the end of the day, she still explained that human nature is human nature, bad and good. So these future people will be just like the past people. I mean, they may be different, but you can't change the parts of what makes us human at the end of the day.
Right. So sorry, go ahead.
A few things I wanted to note. This is her killing all those eggs is the callback to the one clad in blue being an angel of death.
Yeah.
That we mentioned earlier.
And killing the crypt and removing the potential for perfect life later on.
Quote, dooming humanity effectively. Yeah. And two, when we're talking about the crypt, it's like it's just a human body. That is what the crypt is. It is a human body in building form. After they destroy it, it spews blood. It has a bunch of eggs with humans growing in it, just like a human would, and it has a heart and all that.
Yeah, and it was cool. I think that it doesn't really reveal to you that, I guess you could guess that they're standing at the heart at the end, but it didn't occur to me because so much was going on until Oma grabs it and holds it up, and I'm like, oh shit, that's the heart and that's like, that's cool. That's symbolic.
I didn't put it together until then either. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, I think the big thing that I want to talk about, because I called it out in my notes so much, is this sort of essentially the idea of the yin and the yang, right? Which is the idea sort of that in all light there is a little bit of dark, in all dark there's a little bit of light, in all good there's bad, and all bad there's good. I actually think that all these conversations about sort of nature and man kind of boil down, or there's a sort of a higher theme above all of that, which I think is this idea of all sort of pure light and pure dark are bad, and that the yin and the yang are the correct form of the world.
100%.
I think this is what Miyazaki is saying with everything he's saying, especially in this last part, right? I think he gets this last part and he goes, I got it. I know what all this means. I figured myself out. It's about the yin and the yang. It's about there being...
He knows about the yin and the yang, like, even like when Nausicaä pulls the dark priest or whatever into the light, and he's like, and the forest guy's like, why are you letting him in here? He's a creature of the darkness. And she's like, oh, it doesn't matter.
She's right,
it's part of me,
she says like, well, we're inside my mind, aren't we, right now? So if there's darkness in here, it's my darkness. But so it's cool to see that we're talking about all of this humans and nature separation and stuff, and what I think that all kind of boils down kind of to in this yin and the yang conversation is that Miyazaki is calling out that if you look at the like nature as the light of life, right? If you look at life as one side of the yin and the yang, let's call it the light side, because I think that's what the story says. Humans are sort of the darkness inside the light, but that does not separate them they are still part of life, right? They are the dark part of life, but they are still part of life. And that is the sort of the yin and the yang thing, right? Is that you can't have all light, you can't have all darkness.
So here, light and darkness does represent good and bad, but I think moreover, what it represents is life and death.
Yes.
And here's what I'm thinking when it comes to that kind of state is like, I think nature itself doesn't have those definitions because it doesn't need to. Life and death are just a naturally occurring part of the process. Right. Whereas humans put them in buckets where like the creature of light is trying to mitigate death by all means. It's denying death, as Nausicaä said.
Yeah.
With its plans, its concoctions, and effectively by running away, it is failing the race, failing the human race, and failing the natural order. And that's like a grave, terrible thing in Nausicaa's eyes. Whereas she is the yin and the yang, right? She accepts life and death, good and bad, as part of the natural order. So being too far into one side of it, being so obsessed with life, or being a warmonger so obsessed with death, it both are human definitions and both are incorrect paths for our species or the betterment of the world as a whole.
Yes.
That's how I saw it. Yeah. And it's kind of represented by Oma's irradiating light.
Right. I mean,
in this
and that's the other cool thing about this whole last part is that I don't think you can really say wholesale that all light is good, all dark is bad, or all light is life, all dark is death, because there is stuff like Oma's light, which is death, right? Oma's light brings death. That's like, you can just say that straight up.
You're absolutely right with yin and yang. I think it's just too much of either, and an obsession with either. It just skews the vote. You don't want that.
You can't. Yeah, I mean the whole idea of yin and yang is that all good or all bad is. You can't say bad because you already said it. All good and all bad is not correct. You have to have the bad things have to be tempered by good, and the good things have to be tempered by bad. The light has to be tempered by darkness. I mean, you can see, everyone knows what a yin and yang looks like. I hope. If not, Google it. You'll understand it. But yeah, even as so far back as I think it was part 5, maybe 4 or 5, where Nausicaa's in her like sort of mental area fighting with like the full darkness dude, right? The zombie guy. He's full darkness and he's shown as bad. But then we also get Nausicaä Nausicaa's our protagonist, but she also represents darkness at the end here, which represents death. But that death is also shown as correct because
I think she represents light for the rest of the story though. So I think
for most of it,
it's more so. I think it's more so a counterbalance. She represents the yin when all we have is yang, and the reverse. She's the yang when all we have is yin. You know, she's.
I think you hit exactly on it, maybe accidentally, but she's the balance.
No, purposely.
In fact. She's I was just saying. You said balance, and I think that's what Nausicaä is, right? Is that
Absolutely.
we've commented since the beginning that. I've said it maybe every single time. I expected a Disney princess, and that is not what I got. Nausicaä is not, because Disney princess is all good, right? A Disney princess can do no wrong, is kind and good, and is not a yin and yang type character. Whereas Nausicaä brings with her anger and violence and a willingness to go to war for the things that she believes in, right? A willingness to have a bit of darkness in her to pursue the light. And I do think that in all 6 other parts, if you talked about, well, is Nausicaä light with a little bit of darkness or darkness with a little bit of light? You would say pretty wholesale, Nausicaä is light with a little bit of darkness in her, right? That's the sort of side of the yin and the yang that she is. I think it's cool in part 7 because I think in part 7, it very purposefully, the story goes out of its way to show us that she plays the role, at least, of darkness with a little bit of light in her. That she is actually more the god of death that she was maybe prophesied to be, right? Is that because again, why the ending is controversial, you could say. She goes in and gets rid of, she eliminates the chance for all these past people to live again, all of these people to live in their future perfect world. Those aren't, well, I think we both agree that those are sort of nuanced and thematically appropriate decisions for the story. If you just told me, hey, the world burned down, some people created a way to rebuild the world, and then they're going to repopulate it with a perfect populace. Somebody came in and blew all that up. There is no perfect world now. It'll always be flawed. Would you be like, was that a good decision? You'd be like, no, probably not. Like, kind of.
I would argue within the context of her world.
Yes.
That crypt was was a detriment for the piece she was trying to create, because it only provided the evil and power hungry with tools of war and destruction.
Yes. Well, and that's what I was trying to say is inside the context of the story, it all makes sense. But outside the context of the story, the sort of decisions she makes and does in the end are bad ending decisions. Like if you're playing like a video game, this is kind of a bad ending, right? The good ending is, everyone wakes up and we're all happy at the end. This is the bad ending. This is, or maybe the neutral ending. It's the balanced ending, right? It's the yin and the yang ending. It's not everything burns down and the crypt continues and war is still bad. It's not we all wake up in the perfect world and are reborn and get to have our clean air and our trees. It is let's see what happens. This is the sort of not the good or the bad ending. This is the neutral ending, which is why it's controversial. This is the yin and the yang.
Well, the heart of the crypt spoke with a lot of gusto, but at the end of the day, none of their plans worked. And chances are this wouldn't have worked how they saw it working either. Life is too unpredictable, and I think Nausicaä is effectively just saying, living in the natural order. Whatever happens, happens. We made it this far, even though we were all supposed to be dead a while ago. Good take. You know what? Whatever happens, happens. I think she has done a great job of fostering peace amongst the people living in the world at the moment. So I have faith with with that kind of ending that humanity just makes it. They make it by changing their perspective, attitude, and kind of just respecting each other in the natural order more.
Yeah, and
especially with all the shit Nausicaä did, she is effectively a god to everyone there.
Yeah, and I mean it's also so. One last thing I guess I can call out is that the crypt guys at the end call Nausicaä a nihilist, and I actually think this is Nausicaä is a pretty nihilistic preaching story when you think about it. Because if you consider nihilism being, and I'll just grab it from Wiki, right? It says it's a views within philosophy that reject generally accepted or fundamental aspects of human existence, such as knowledge, morality, or meaning. And I think that the rejection of morality and meaning that seems what this story we're talking about, sort of like rejecting there being good or bad, no morality, right? Did Nausicaä make a moral choice in the end? Not really. She sort of rejects the morality, right? Because I think the true moral choice, again, kind of outside the context of the story, but also inside of it, right? The moral thing is to say, well, if a perfect world is possible, you should let that happen. You should do that. But she rejects that because she's literally a nihilist. So it's a very cool nihilist arc.
I don't think she's a nihilist, and I don't think she rejected morality. She just embraced that there are good things and there are bad things, bad decisions. And I think within her mind, she is moral because she sees them as nihilists, escaping from death, running away from their problems, and trying to band-aid their solution X amount of years later, and saying, "Hey, we figured it out," when they're the reasons this all happened in the first place. Whereas in her mind, she has brought peace. The new rulers are not people driven by violence and ego. I believe from that angle, she views them as the nihilist. Whereas the reverse could also be true. From their perspective, she's the nihilist. I think that's what's interesting is depending on the perspective or side you agree with, the other side is the nihilist party.
Yeah, well, because taking the moral high ground, rejection of morality, Yeah, it's very interesting. I do think that from Miyazaki's point of view, writing this, I think that he's maybe not full nihilist, but I think that in writing this and the sort of the themes and all this stuff at the end, he is very much rejecting a sort of traditional human morality, I guess you could say. He's going against how do I say it?
Oh, that much you're very much right. I was talking within the story, but outside of the story, yeah, you could say Miyazaki this is definitely a nihilistic take on humanity, but I don't think it is unrealistic. Like I feel like he struck the core of humanity with this story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and even if it isn't, I don't think this story will ring true with every person who reads it, and I think that's okay. I think that Miyazaki hit on the core of his own humanity here. I think he's tied to this art in a way that not everyone else will be. I think it spoke to you and me, and I think that's good. I think there are a lot of people who would read this who don't agree with the positions, especially decisions at the end. I think that's okay. I like I was trying to sort of argue and say earlier, I do think you can make an argument that the decision that Nausicaä makes at the end is wrong and bad. Now, again, the story around it has set it up to be the right decision, but that's Miyazaki is telling you, Miyazaki is leading you to say this is the right decision by creating his story around it and showing you his perspective and his point of view of the world. And so if you follow along with him and sort of follow him in his story, then you go, oh yes, he's right, because he's told me, he's set up all of the pieces and let me know that he's right. So when she makes a decision in the end, I agree with it. But that doesn't, I don't think that should make you as a reader say, if I don't agree with this, I'm wrong, because I think it's okay and good to disagree with what Nausicaä did at the end. I think that's why it's controversial, right? Is that
and it was intentionally so. Miyazaki, if he wanted to paint this as one-sided, he very well could have, but he intentionally made this a more complicated issue, and showed the positives of what the Heart of the Crypt was talking about.
Yeah,
and their intentions are just good from their perspective. They are just intentions of preservation of themselves, their culture, and the human
and of like a healthy world. I mean, they're not, if you kind of remove them from the story and you say, okay, the world came to an end, we are trying to preserve it and rebuild it and restart the world as a peaceful thing with all of the good things we had with music and plants. It's like, that's not bad. You're not doing a bad thing there. You're doing a good thing. But there's more context on top of it. And yeah, so.
Yeah, and Nausicaa's TLDR, she's saying, you guys missed the point a long time ago, and you are still missing the point. The world is how it is for your own mistakes, like you realized, but your fix ain't it, Chief. And yeah, that's basically how their little tiff went. Whichever side you fall on, I think it is just a very fucking strong ending. Because what I was worried about reading all of this is that this will be tied up neatly with a little bow and have everyone went back to the Valley of the Wind for a nice little party kind of ending, you know? And it was not that.
It definitely was not that. This was intense. I think this is like all great art. No great art pleases all people, is what I will say. I think that the best and most lasting artistic works, stories, whatever it is, are sort of inseparably tied to their creators and to their audience, that no art can be popular for all people. So,
agreed.
And that's kind of what I guess I was saying about the whole, like, you don't have to, I think it's okay to not agree with the decision Nausicaä made, to think that it was the wrong decision. Again, like I said, if this is a video game with 3 endings, we did not get the happy ending or the bad ending. This is sort of the middle ending. This is sort of the neutral, some good things occurred because our main characters lived and they're going to have their chance. They're given the freedom, but some bad things happen because the perfect world is not an option anymore, right? They will always be. Is that
not the theme of the story in the first place?
Exactly. Yeah.
In that way, that is the perfect ending.
It is, yeah. It's the perfect ending for. It is the correct ending for the story that Miyazaki told. Is what it is, which is what we were both afraid of, but was avoided here because this is.
Yeah. It's I'm glad we got to talk about it. I think there was just like so much nuance and depth to that whole series. I am struggling to find like issues with it. I don't have criticism.
I have a couple of some very minor criticisms.
I have gripes. I don't have like critiques.
Yeah.
I think some of these characters. Well, the last part probably should have been longer, split into like another section or something.
This could have been 2 parts. So every other part I think was like 120 to 150 chapters. This part is like I said, like 210 pages or something. So,
and I think some of the characters could have used it. God, what is the Princess of Turamekia called?
Kushana. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Kushana. I was satisfied with her character because her arc ended in like part 3 or part 4.
Yeah, 5 or 6. Yeah,
and she played a good addition as a supporting cast member, like all of the Valley Boys.
Yeah.
I was kind of expecting her to be more of a like major player, but I'm very satisfied with how her character turned out. Asbel, on the other hand, that's
a pretty useless character in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he could not be in the story, and none of my feelings about the story nor the plot would change that much.
Yeah, I think exists because the first chapters of this were written in 1982-83 when they were also making the movie. And though I have not seen the movie, I assume that Asbel was much more of a love interest boy partner character to Nausicaä in that movie.
He was, if I remember.
Yeah. And I think that he can't just sort of be thrown away and forgotten, but yeah, and I think that's sort of the issue with this very last part is that you're right. It should have probably been, instead of 210 pages, it should have been, 250 page parts. But at the same time, this is 12 years of Miyazaki's life. If he writes, 6 more chapters, that's 6 months of his life extra, or whatever.
While doing Ghibli work, I guess.
Well, yeah, while starting up work on Princess Mononoke, which in my opinion is his best movie. So yeah, it definitely did need maybe a little bit more breathing room. A couple of the characters are very just kind of shoved to the side. Like Selm just shows up in like part 5, and he's like the third most important character, maybe the second most important character in the whole of part 7. And
maybe
just
replace Asbel with Selm in some way. I don't know.
I mean, Selm is essentially replaced by Asbel, I would say, in the story as the sort of boy partner character,
or vice versa.
Yeah.
But Asbel was there as a representation of Dorok, and just like Kushana was for Turamekia. But Asbel got quickly replaced by Kesha.
Who got replaced by Charuka.
Oh, true. But Kesha did a far better job. Kesha and Chikuku, and Charuka. They all did like a far better job at representing the Dorokian people than Asbel did, who just got written out of the story a little bit.
Right.
But that is such a minor gripe.
Well, I think it's all a side effect of like, if I were to rank the parts of this story, I think my rankings literally go like 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, I think the very first part is the worst part of the story. And I think the second part gets a little bit better. I think the third part gets better. I think the fourth part gets better. I think it gets better and better as it goes on.
How that works, because I bet if we go back and listen to our part 1 thing, we were very positive about part 1. And it's like just such a pleasant experience that it only got better from there.
Yeah, well, and my one other big gripe I would say is that I think the first 2 parts here, I think the art there is a little bit more rough. And Miyazaki, I think, has commented on this, and some other artists, I've read a couple articles that kind of commented on it, where they say that the early art in Nausicaä, it's very hard to tell characters from background, and there's lots of detailed background with the Sea of Corruption and the ships and stuff, whereas these later parts, the art, I would say, is much more clear, much more interesting. Lots of the art in here is super cool. There's only, I think, 1 spread page in this entire 1,000 pages of manga, which is wild.
Whoa!
Because that's well, I mean, it's also different because Nausicaä is specifically published on a larger page spread than other manga, which is, we talked about I think in the past, where there's 13, 14 panels sometimes on a single page, which you just couldn't fit on a normal sized manga page. So it's cool from an artistic thing. But yeah, the only spread page I believe is the coming of the Omu with the Daikaisho, and
that's a good one for it.
I think that's in part 4 is where it is. But it's the only spread. But there's other sort of large panels that occupy half a page, a third, but like if something occupies half a page in Nausicaä, like that's a huge panel. And we do get a couple of those, but like most of the time it's much, much smaller panels here. So
I had expected Nausicaä to save the Omu in some way. I didn't expect them to all die and stay dead. And I thought that was really good. That was just subversion for me.
It's great. I sort of expected when they talked about the Daikaisho, I was like, oh, they're talking about the climax of the whole story happening. And it's like, no. And then it's a really cool sort of, I guess the best way you would say is like, it's a very cool, like multi-season story, right? Where, every season kind of has its own bad guy. At a certain point, it's the Tormekians are the bad guys, and then after that, the Doroks, and then after that, they're fighting against each other, and then it's the Daikaisho, and then it's Namulith, and then it's the Crypt. Like, every sort of arc has its own... It's like a multi-arc story that flows really well, in my opinion.
And it's like... It is never boring. Like, there is... maybe the only part of it that I thought was out of place was the part with the New Valley of the Wind Girl.
Yeah, New Valley of the Wind Girl felt like a weird chapter. That, and then the one page where it's like, I need to tell you how the Sea of Corruption works again because you've forgotten it's been 8 years.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a couple of super minor things.
I thought that chapter existed to put like the fate of Nausicaä in our head. And I guess it did that. But the old lady was like, they're worried that the New Valley of the Wind Girl or the new Child of the Wind means that the old Child of the Wind won't come back. And it's like that was never really delivered upon. So that chapter was just like, within the context of the whole story, it
doesn't give us any new information or important information. Again, no art is perfect. I think I have critiques over all of my favorite things, which I think Nausicaä is now like one of my favorite manga. This is such an exceptional piece of art.
What I'm doing right now is just scraping the bottom of the barrel for
because we got
it. Because like with things like this, I think it did everything right. So it's easier and faster to just talk about what could use work because it was so fucking phenomenal at every angle that it would be like another 3 hours if we had to cover everything.
I like to talk about the sort of skeleton of the story being like the story and the plot and the characters and all of that is so exceptionally good and perfect, and the sort of thematic elements, especially in this part 7, are so good and so consistent, and everything lines up perfectly and resolves the way that it should based on the way the story's been told, that it's like, art's a little rough sometimes. Like, who cares? Like, I do not care that sometimes there's 14 panels and I can't tell what's going on. I don't care because it's so resonant. The theme works so well. The characters. Nausicaä is like easily the best manga main character maybe of all time. I think even though I may not rank Nausicaä number 1, I think over my other sort of number 1 manga, she might be the best main character I've ever seen in a manga.
It's so incredible how I think no other manga I've read has chosen and delivered upon a theme so perfectly, because Miyazaki just fires from every angle, and her characters are so his characters are so incredibly consistently written. Yeah.
I think the only other thing that is as thematically consistent from start to finish as this that I've read is Attack on Titan, because Attack on Titan's anti-war stance that it develops from chapter 1 until its final chapter, I think is, and I think that it's a little bit simpler than the kind of complexities that Nausicaä gets into, but I think that that's another one that's really thematically consistent, and I really, and Attack on Titan I would rate, again, in my top 5 manga of all time, right up there with Nausicaä, so.
Both big anti-war sentiments.
A lot of anti-war in here. We didn't really talk about this, but there's a lot of just like stop killing each other. Like a lot of Miyazaki going through and saying, all of this stuff about yin and yang and light and dark and humans and nature and stuff, and it's just like, but by the way, humans, like stop killing each other, stop war, stop fighting, please stop doing this. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, hey, you know what? Life's hard enough. You don't need to fucking gun each other down.
Yeah. And nature doesn't have wars, so stop having wars. Like, there's a lot of that. But yeah, I mean, very clear anti-war sentiment. He's got the kind of, I think probably the Japanese people of post-war, post-World War II Japan, I think they all just kind of felt the same way about a lot of things. I think they're all kind of vehemently anti-war, anti-atomic weapons for obvious reasons, right? Like those, and I think that pervades a ton of art from the time. I know that Tezuka, who does Astro Boy, I know that a lot of his stuff was anti-war. A lot of his stuff was kind of atomic age, but anti-atomic weaponry and that kinds of things. Astro Boy is not built to be a weapon. He's built to be a boy that learns. I think this is a Japanese zeitgeist feeling that Miyazaki could not keep out of his story if he wanted to. The anti-war and the anti-atomic sentiment is just like, it's baked into the Japanese people for 30 or 40 years after World War II.
And I appreciate that it was explicitly stated that, yes, it had a lot of nuclear metaphors, anti-war metaphors, but it painted war very clearly that it's just something that is petty and fought for reasons that truly don't matter. And
violent.
Nobody's clean from it. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we talked about even in part 1 about how it's like, oh, this is like gross violence, like not like normal, kind of shonen, oh haha, a sword went through. It's like there is blood, there's people getting cut in half. I like that it doesn't shy away from making violence kind of make you shulk back and be like, that's gross, that's awful, because it wants you to feel that. So,
and it's never a Japan is victim, America bad kind of thing.
Yeah.
From the nuclear sentiment, just to clarify, it is very much everyone who participates in a war, which is all of humanity, is stupid for doing so.
Yeah, I mean, the anti-war sentiment in general, and this is, Attack on Titan has the same take, is that it's like there's no like, we did a war and came out better for it. Like everyone who participates or goes to war is bad, and this has the exact same take, right? Which is that like war benefits no one. It's not good for anyone. It only does bad things. Don't do it. And yet there's no sort of like, you are bad for doing war on us. It's like, no, if we participate in that war at all, we are also doing bad. So, yeah.
I appreciate the episode or the chapter where Nausicaä went to war because out of necessity.
Yeah. I like that part a lot too.
It shows the nuance where it's not just easy to say war is bad and humans shouldn't do it. Sometimes you get caught up in it. Like sometimes you have to make hard choices that betray what you thought were the values you held. And I appreciate that there was those segments too.
Well, it also is like it speaks to Nausicaä the character is able to be anti-war because she has participated in war and has seen it, and that gives her power and proactivity to do that that a character that had not been to war might not have. And that's just smart character writing, right? You can have someone standing on a soapbox that has never been to Vietnam speak out against the Vietnam War, or you can have a Vietnam vet say, I went there, it was awful, we should not be doing this. The second person has more power of voice, you could say. So I think it's a just perfect character thing to do, to be like, Nausicaä has to go to war to be truly anti-war, is like, yeah, she does. It gives her more power.
I think that is also a good reason why when she walked into the crypt at the end there, everyone stood aside, even though she was not a monarch, because by all means, aside from a title, she had power.
She literally like queen of the Omu and like leader of the like religious Doroks. She's the religious leader of the worm handlers. She effectively leads like 70% of the living world right now.
Yeah, like it is in everything but title. Yeah. She has earned her place there, and that's why everyone cuts their sentences short and just lets her go by, because she deserves to be there, more than anyone. And even the king of Tormechia lets her do all the talking.
The king of Tormechia is like, whoa, another king, and then is like, I will, and then like saves her life at the end, gives his life for hers, agrees with everything she's saying at the end. Yeah, and we're like led to believe when we're introduced to this guy, like, this guy's a shitter, he's going to be only bad. And another sort of wonderful thing of Nausicaä is that we get characters like Namulith, like the king of Tormechia, where you're like, oh, this guy's a complete awful douchebag. And then it's like, okay, he's not a total douchebag. He saved Nausicaa. He agreed with her. He like might have, and he sort of admits that like I did it the wrong way. You know, Kushana, you can do it better. Let me give you advice before I die.
It's just very nuanced. Villains with nuance. Yeah, exactly.
Classic yin and yang. Classic a dark black character with a little bit of light inside him. So it all comes back to that. I'm very sold on the yin and the yang in Nausicaä here being like the corest of core themes.
Agreed. And on that note, I think I've said all that needs to be said on the series.
Yeah, I think we have said a lot. We have said hours and hours on this series. It has been a wonderful ride. Gautam, let's be a little base and stupid. Give me a score out of 10. Or no, give me a S, A, B, C, D, E with some pluses in there. Give me a score.
Does it go to S plus? Is that the highest?
S plus would be the highest, yeah.
S plus.
Yeah. I think this, like I said, I agree. This is in my probably top 3 manga I've ever read and completed.
If we can't give this the highest score, then I don't think we can give any manga the highest score. You know what I mean?
I agree.
It's so fucking exceptional.
No art is perfect. There's a couple little issues with it, but like, man, I don't know if I've read any art that is this thematically consistent in like a long, long time. Like this is
same. Yeah.
So incredibly exceptional. Awesome. Hey, you there. If you've come on this long journey with us, we do appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed Nausicaä, because that's really the joy here. Even if you don't listen to us, if you've somehow watched this and have not read Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind, go read it. It's way better than the videos that we record. So, thank you again.
Honestly, it is probably better than any manga you've read in a while.
Almost guaranteed, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you again for coming on this journey with us. Thank you so much for sticking around. We hope you had fun reading along with us, enjoying Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. Give us a like, follow, subscribe. We always appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, that's all I got. Adios. And hey, don't forget to read more manga.